In the secluded mountain town of Graypine, nestled between shadowy peaks and dense forests, a chilling mist perpetually lingered. The town was quaint, untouched by time, where every face was familiar and secrets didn't stay hidden for long. That was until the virus came, uninvited and unseen, creeping into their lives like the fog that hugged their homes. It began subtly. Old Man Jenkins, the town's hermit, was the first. He wandered into the center of town, eyes wide with unspeakable terror, muttering about shadows that whispered and creatures that lurked in the corners of his vision. The townsfolk dismissed it as the ramblings of a lonely old man. But then, more reports surfaced. People spoke in hushed tones about nightmarish visions that haunted them, grotesque figures in the mist, and whispers that seemed to echo from the woods. Sheriff Harper, a stoic man who had seen his share of trouble, tried to maintain order, but the panic was palpable. When young Ellie, the baker's daughter, fell ill, the town's fear turned to dread. She spoke of dark, twisted dreams, where the trees themselves reached out to grab her, their branches twisting into gnarled hands. Then, just as suddenly, she'd slip into a feverish delirium, her body growing colder by the hour. Dr. Langley, the town's only physician, was at a loss. The virus, if it was a virus, didn't match any known pathogen. Blood samples showed nothing, and the symptoms varied wildly, save for the hallucinations and the fever that eventually claimed its victims. In the heart of Graypine, there stood an ancient, abandoned church, its spire like a gnarled finger pointing accusingly at the sky. It was here that the locals began to notice something peculiar. The mist seemed thicker around its crumbling walls, and some claimed they could hear faint, ethereal singing emanating from within its desolate nave at night. A group of brave, or perhaps foolhardy townsfolk, led by Sheriff Harper, decided to investigate the church. They hoped to find answers, to uncover the source of this affliction that was slowly consuming their town. As they approached, the air grew colder, the mist denser. The church loomed over them, its stained glass windows shattered, the remnants looking like gaping hollow eyes. The heavy wooden door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing the dust-laden interior, pews strewn haphazardly as if the congregation had fled in a hurry. The group felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold. It was as if the very walls of the church whispered secrets in a language long forgotten. They ventured deeper, past the altar, and that's when they found it. A hidden chamber beneath the church, sealed with an ancient lock that crumbled at their touch. Inside the chamber, they discovered something that sent shivers down their spines. A series of old, decrepit tomes and strange artifacts encircled by what appeared to be a ritualistic arrangement of bones. In the center of this macabre display sat a small black stone, pulsating with an eerie light. As they examined the stone, a sense of dread filled the air. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to claw at their sanity. Sheriff Harper reached out to touch the stone, and as his fingers brushed its surface, the church shook with a violent tremor. Suddenly, the visions were there, in the waking world. Twisted shadows danced along the walls, and the faces of long-dead parishioners appeared in the mist, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. The group fled, terror driving them back into the relative safety of the misty streets of Graypine. But the discovery in the church had changed something. The town was no longer just battling an unseen virus. They were now caught in a struggle against something far older and more sinister, something that had been awakened by their intrusion. As the townsfolk barricaded themselves in their homes, whispers of an ancient curse spread like wildfire. The virus, the hallucinations, the church, they were all connected, part of a dark history that Graypine had forgotten. And now, with the night falling and the mist growing thicker, the shadows in the corners of their eyes began to take form, and the whispering grew louder. Something was coming, and the terror that gripped Graypine was only just beginning. The night after the church's haunting secret was uncovered, Graypine fell into a restless, fearful silence. The mist seemed to press against windows like a living entity, eager to invade the safety of their homes. Families huddled together, whispering prayers, while outside, the unnatural whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sheriff Harper, shaken by the events at the church, gathered a meeting at the town hall. The air was thick with anxiety as the townspeople looked to him for answers. He recounted their discovery, the bizarre chamber, the strange artifacts, and the black stone that seemed to be at the heart of their nightmare. Dr. Langley, her face etched with worry, suggested a connection between the stone and the virus. Perhaps, she theorized, the stone was some sort of catalyst or even the source. But this theory only raised more questions than answers. How did it tie into the virus? What was the nature of the ritualistic chamber? And most importantly, how could they stop the escalating horror? As they debated, young Ellie, still bedridden, began to speak in a feverish trance. Her words were disjointed, a mix of fear and wonder, speaking of a great awakening and eyes in the mist. Her father, the baker, wept silently, watching his daughter slip further into delirium. That night, as the full moon cast an eerie glow over the town, the virus claimed its first life. Old man Jenkins, whose ramblings had first warned them of the danger, succumbed to the fever. His death was a grim reminder of their vulnerability, and it spurred the town into desperate action. A group, including Sheriff Harper, Dr. Langley, and some of the braver townsfolk, decided to revisit the church. They hoped to find a way to destroy the stone, believing it might end their nightmare. Armed with whatever they could find, guns, axes, and a fierce determination, they ventured out into the mist. The church, under the moonlight, appeared more sinister than ever. The whispers seemed to turn into mocking laughter as they approached. Inside, they found the chamber as they had left it, the stone still pulsating with a malevolent light. Dr. Langley, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear, examined the artifacts more closely. She noticed that the arrangement of the bones and the artifacts seemed to form a pattern, a ritualistic diagram of sorts. She theorized that reversing the pattern might nullify whatever power the stone held. Working quickly, they rearranged the items, each movement causing the stone's light to flicker erratically. The air grew heavier, and the whispers turned into screams. As they placed the last bone in its reversed position, a shock wave emanated from the stone, throwing them to the ground. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the stone cracked, its light extinguishing. A collective sigh of relief filled the chamber. Had they done it? Had they ended the curse? They emerged from the church to find the town eerily quiet. The mist had receded, and for the first time in days, the stars were visible in the sky. Hope flickered in their hearts as they made their way back to their homes. But as the dawn approached, their relief turned to horror. The virus had not been vanquished. Instead, it had evolved. Those infected began to change, their bodies warping into grotesque forms, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. The virus was spreading faster now, and the hallucinations were no longer just visions. They were becoming real, tangible horrors that stalked the streets of Graypine. The town was now a battleground, a fight for survival against an enemy they did not understand. And amidst the chaos, the whispers continued, a haunting refrain that promised this nightmare was far from over. The transformation of the infected into monstrous forms sent waves of terror through Graypine. The once familiar streets turned into hunting grounds for these twisted beings, their grotesque appearances a horrifying mockery of their former selves. The townsfolk, armed with whatever they could muster, barricaded themselves inside their homes, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were trapped in a living nightmare. Sheriff Harper, struggling to maintain order and hope, organized a group of volunteers to patrol and protect the uninfected. They were the last line of defense, a flickering candle in an overwhelming darkness. Among them was Marianne, a young schoolteacher whose courage belied her gentle appearance. She became an unexpected beacon of bravery, standing alongside the sheriff in the face of unspeakable horror. Meanwhile, Dr. Langley, her lab turned into a makeshift research center, worked tirelessly to understand the virus. Assisted by her apprentice Tom, a bright young man with a keen interest in biology, they dissected the strange phenomena surrounding the outbreak. The more they learned, the more they realized that the virus was unlike anything science had ever encountered. It seemed to have a will of its own, adapting and evolving in response to their actions. As the days passed, the situation grew more dire. Supplies were dwindling, and the infected were becoming more cunning, more aggressive. It was during one such attack that Marianne made a startling discovery. The infected seemed to recoil from certain frequencies of sound. She noticed this when a ringing bell caused them to hesitate, their twisted features contorting in pain. Sharing this discovery with Dr. Langley, they hypothesized that the virus, or whatever intelligence was driving it, was sensitive to specific sonic vibrations. This revelation offered a glimmer of hope, a potential weapon against the encroaching darkness. In a desperate bid, the townsfolk, led by Sheriff Harper and Marianne, began to utilize sound as a defense. The town's old emergency siren, a relic from the Cold War, was repurposed. When activated, it emitted a piercing wail that drove the infected away, albeit temporarily. This small victory gave them much-needed respite and time to plan their next move. But the virus was adapting. The respite was short-lived as the infected began to change again, their bodies mutating to resist the sonic attacks. The town realized they were in a race against time, battling an enemy that was learning from them. Amidst the chaos, a mysterious figure appeared in town, a traveler who had been hiking in the mountains, unaware of the outbreak. He spoke of a hidden valley and an ancient legend tied to Graypine, a tale of a curse placed upon the land by a scorned witch centuries ago. According to him, the curse could only be lifted by returning what was taken from her, a cryptic clue that left the townsfolk bewildered. With this new piece of the puzzle, Dr. Langley and Marianne decided to delve into the town's archives, searching for any records that might shed light on this legend. What they found was a tale of betrayal and revenge, of a powerful witch who was wronged by the town's ancestors and who swore vengeance upon their descendants. The witch, it was said, had a talisman of great power, a black stone that was the source of her magic. The town's founders had stolen it, hoping to harness its power for themselves, inadvertently unleashing the curse. As they pieced together the story, they realized the black stone they had found in the church might be the same talisman. If they could find a way to return it to its rightful place, perhaps the curse would be lifted. But time was running out. The infected were closing in, more numerous and ferocious than ever. The town was on the brink of collapse, and their final stand was imminent. Sheriff Harper and Marianne rallied the townspeople for what might be their last fight, a desperate attempt to reclaim their town from the clutches of the nightmare. As they prepared, the mist rolled in once more, thicker and more ominous than ever, as if sensing the impending battle. And in the distance, the haunting whispers returned, a chorus of dread that promised no escape. The night of the final stand in Graypine was a tapestry of terror and desperation. The streets, shrouded in an impenetrable mist, echoed with the groans of the infected and the cries of the townsfolk. Sheriff Harper, Marianne, and the remaining able-bodied residents fortified the town center, their faces set in grim determination. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Langley and Tom worked feverishly on a plan to return the Black Stone to its rightful place. Based on the ancient texts and the traveler's account, they deduced that the stone needed to be placed in a specific location in the hidden valley the traveler had mentioned. The problem was reaching it, as the valley was surrounded by dense forest, now undoubtedly teeming with the infected. As the night progressed, the situation in the town center became dire. The infected, seemingly driven by a singular malevolent intent, assaulted their defenses with relentless fury. Marianne, wielding a makeshift weapon, fought alongside the men and women she had once taught in school, her heart heavy with the knowledge that some of the twisted creatures they faced were her former students. In a lull in the fighting, Dr. Langley approached Sheriff Harper with their plan. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance they had. A small team would escort her and Tom to the valley with the stone, hoping to end the curse. Harper, though reluctant to leave his people, knew it was their only hope. He volunteered to go with them, along with Marianne and a few others. They set out under the cover of darkness, the eerie glow of the moon their only guide. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and unseen dangers, the howls of the infected a constant reminder of the peril they faced. As they neared the valley, the air grew colder, the mist thicker. A sense of foreboding hung over them, as if the land itself was aware of their intentions. Finally, they reached the valley, a serene, untouched place that seemed a world away from the nightmare they had left behind. In the heart of the valley stood an ancient altar, overgrown with moss and vines. It was here that they placed the stone, its malevolent energy pulsating in response to its rightful setting. Dr. Langley recited words from the ancient texts, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. As she spoke the final words, a deafening roar filled the valley. The ground trembled, and the mist swirled violently around them. The infected, drawn to the valley by the stone's power, emerged from the forest, their twisted forms a grotesque sight in the moonlight. A fierce battle ensued, the defenders fighting back-to-back against the onslaught. Marianne, her resolve unbroken, fought with a ferocity that belied her gentle nature. Sheriff Harper, his gun never faltering, protected Dr. Langley and Tom as they completed the ritual. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The infected collapsed to the ground, their bodies dissolving into the mist, which began to recede like a tide. The black stone, once pulsating with dark energy, now lay inert, its power seemingly extinguished. As dawn broke, the survivors gazed around in disbelief. The curse was lifted. The nightmare was over. But the cost had been high. The town of Graypine was forever changed, its streets now a graveyard of memories. Dr. Langley, Sheriff Harper, Marianne, Tom, and the few others who had survived returned to the town. They were greeted not with joy, but with a somber realization of the new reality they faced. They had won, but the victory was bittersweet. The town would rebuild, but the scars of the nightmare would remain. The mist had cleared, but the shadows it had brought lingered in the hearts of those who had witnessed the horrors of the isolated town nightmare. In the aftermath of the harrowing night, the survivors of Graypine gathered amidst the ruins of their once peaceful town. The morning sun cast a surreal glow over the empty streets, illuminating the aftermath of the nightmare they had endured. Buildings stood silent, marked by the struggle, and the air, though clear of the mist, still held a whisper of the fear that had consumed them. Sheriff Harper, Marianne, Dr. Langley, and Tom walked through the town, their steps heavy with the weight of loss and survival. The town was quiet, save for the soft murmurs of the survivors as they began the daunting task of rebuilding not just their homes, but their lives. In the days that followed, Graypine became a town in mourning. Funerals were held for those lost to the virus, each name a stark reminder of the price they had paid. Yet, in this time of grief, there was a glimmer of unity and strength. The townsfolk, bonded by their shared ordeal, worked together to restore Graypine, their determination a testament to the human spirit. Dr. Langley and Tom, their research invaluable during the crisis, continued to study the virus and the Black Stone. The stone, now dormant, was an enigma, a relic of a darker time that had nearly doomed them all. They hoped to unlock its secrets, to ensure that such a nightmare would never befall them or anyone else again. Sheriff Harper and Marianne took on the task of organizing the town's defenses. The threat was gone, but the memory of it lingered. They trained volunteers, established patrols, and set up communication with neighboring towns, which had been oblivious to the horror that had unfolded in Graypine. As the town slowly healed, a sense of normalcy began to return. Shops reopened, children's laughter filled the air once more, and the community events that had always been the heart of Graypine resumed. Life, it seemed, was finding a way to go on. But the shadow of the nightmare was ever present. At night, some claimed they could still hear whispers in the wind, a haunting echo of the terror they had faced. Others spoke of seeing figures in the mist, though the mist had long since dissipated. It was as if the town itself had been indelibly marked by the otherworldly events. The legend of the isolated town nightmare spread beyond the mountains, drawing curious outsiders, researchers, and even a few thrill-seekers. Graypine, once a hidden gem, was now a place of dark tourism, its story a chilling reminder of the unknown dangers that could lurk in the most unsuspecting of places. As the first anniversary of the nightmare approached, the townsfolk planned a vigil. It was a time to remember, to honor the lost, and to celebrate their survival. The night of the vigil, the town center was lit with candles, casting a warm, flickering light against the darkness. But as the clock struck midnight, a cold wind swept through Graypine, extinguishing the candles in a breath. A thick fog, reminiscent of the mist, rolled in from the woods, shrouding the town in an eerie silence. In that moment, a chilling realization settled in the hearts of the survivors. The nightmare of Graypine was not over. It was merely slumbering. And as they stood together, facing the creeping fog, they understood that the true nature of their town had changed forever. Graypine had become a place where the line between reality and nightmare was forever blurred, a haunting reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present shadow of the unknown.